There are people who move through life quietly. They don't dominate conversations. They don't make grand entrances. They aren't the ones who capture a room's attention. They sit at the edges, polite, steady, predictable. Some might call them dull. Others might say they're boring. But behind that word, boring, lies a deeper psychology. Because what we call boring may actually reveal more about our society, our attention spans, and even our discomfort with stillness than it does about them. Today, we're diving into the psychology of people who are boring and dull, and why, in many ways, they might understand life better than we think. We live in a world that worships stimulation. Flashy lights, constant notifications, endless noise. So when someone doesn't play along, when they're calm, simple, or repetitive, we label them boring. But what does boring really mean? In psychology, boring isn't an insult. It's often described as a low-stimulation behavioral pattern, meaning the person doesn't seek constant novelty or excitement. To the outside observer, that looks like stillness. To them, it feels like peace. Someone who loves routine, who wakes up at the same time, eats the same breakfast, follows the same rhythm, may seem dull to others. But for their brain, predictability reduces stress and provides balance. So maybe, just maybe, what we call boring is actually the sign of someone who's learned to live without chaos. Let's explore what's happening inside a so-called boring person's mind. Number 1. Personality traits. Psychologists use something called the Big Five personality model. People who seem dull often score low on extroversion, meaning they prefer solitude, quiet, and introspection. But they might score high on conscientiousness, organized, responsible, reliable. In short, calm, not chaotic. Number 2. Cognitive style. Boring people often have low novelty-seeking behavior. This doesn't mean they fear change, they just don't crave it. Their brains produce less dopamine when encountering new stimuli. So they don't chase excitement, they create stability. Number 3. Emotional regulation. Some people appear dull because they regulate emotions tightly. They don't display big reactions. They don't dramatize. In a world addicted to overreaction, that emotional stillness can look like emptiness. But it's actually control. Number 4. Social inhibition. For others, it's social anxiety. They hold back, afraid to say the wrong thing, to be judged, to take up space. So they become quiet, reserved, predictable, not because they lack personality, but because they've learned that safety lies in silence. 5. Misunderstood introversion. Introverts often get mislabeled as dull. They're not uninterested, they're selectively interested. They prefer deep topics over small talk, meaningful connection over crowds. So when someone seems boring, it might just mean you haven't reached the layer where their real world begins. Let's flip the perspective. Why do we find people boring? The answer lies in how our brains are wired. Humans crave novelty. Every new idea, image, or sound triggers dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical. So when we meet someone calm, measured, or repetitive, our brain doesn't get that spike, and we label them dull. But here's the twist. It's not that they're boring. It's that we've become overstimulated. We're used to instant entertainment. Social media has trained us to expect a new story every 15 seconds. So real people, who speak slowly, think before they talk, or take time to connect, feel too slow. That's not a flaw in them. That's a symptom in us. Psychologists call this the stimulation gap, the space between how fast the world moves and how slowly real life unfolds. And people who move at life's natural pace, the boring ones, remind us of that gap. They make us uncomfortable, not because they lack excitement, but because they mirror how impatient we've become. Here's something rarely said. Boring people often have richer inner lives than the loud ones. They listen more. They observe longer. They notice subtleties others miss. Still waters, as they say, run deep. In relationships, they're often steady and dependable. In work, they're reliable and methodical. In thought, they're reflective rather than reactive. Psychologist Susan Cain, in her research on introversion, notes that quiet people often think deeply about meaning, values, and purpose. They might not perform their emotions, but they process them more profoundly. While the world celebrates charisma, the dull often hold a kind of inner wisdom. They don't need to be seen to feel complete. In a noisy age, that's almost revolutionary. Science actually backs this up. A 2022 study by the University of Essex explored the psychology of perceived boringness. Researchers found that people labeled boring were often those in repetitive jobs: accountants, data analysts, administrative workers. But the twist? These same people reported lower stress levels, higher satisfaction with stability, and greater long-term well-being. Another set of studies on personality shows that boring individuals often have higher self-regulation. They can control impulses, emotions, and distractions better than average. Brain scans reveal that introverts show more activity in internal processing regions, while extroverts show more in external stimulation areas. That means quiet people experience depth inwardly. You just can't see it. So what looks like dullness might simply be invisible complexity. But there's a painful side to this. Being called boring hurts, more than most realize. When people label you as dull, it often leads to social invisibility. You get fewer invitations, less attention, less emotional engagement. Over time, many quiet people internalize it, believing something's wrong with them. They withdraw even further, creating a loop of isolation. This is what psychologists call the boringness spiral. When being misunderstood leads to avoidance, which reinforces the misunderstanding. And our culture doesn't help. Modern society rewards performers, not thinkers. We celebrate those who can fill silence, not those who are comfortable within it. But here's the truth. There's nothing wrong with being calm. There's nothing wrong with being measured. Sometimes stillness is a superpower. It just goes unnoticed in a world obsessed with noise. Maybe it's time to redefine what boring means. For too long, we've treated it as a flaw, a lack of spark, a missing color in someone's personality. But what if being boring isn't about what's missing, but about what's preserved? What if boring people aren't lacking something, but protecting something? Protecting peace, protecting focus, protecting authenticity. We often assume that to be interesting, one must be loud, unpredictable, or constantly entertaining. Yet, in truth, that kind of energy often hides restlessness. The constant need to amuse, to perform, to fill silence. It's rarely a sign of confidence. More often, it's a symptom of anxiety, the fear of being unseen, unheard, or forgotten. But boring people don't play that game. They don't rush to fill every silence or twist themselves into shapes just to hold attention. They live quietly, often unnoticed, but not unfulfilled. In a world where everyone's trying to be heard, they've mastered the art of being present. Calmness, which so many mistake for dullness, is actually a sign of emotional maturity. Not everyone who's quiet is disengaged. Many are simply grounded, at peace with themselves, unbothered by the noise of the world. They're not performing for approval or applause. Their sense of self doesn't depend on constant feedback. They move through conversations without needing to dominate them. They listen, truly listen, not because they're unsure of what to say, but because they value understanding more than expression. There's a serenity in that kind of presence, a steadiness that comes from self-acceptance. Calm people don't need to impress, because they aren't at war with who they are. And that calm can feel foreign to those of us raised in the chaos of constant stimulation. We're used to movement, to drama, to noise. We confuse excitement with aliveness, forgetting that stillness can also pulse with depth. When we call someone boring, what we often mean is that they don't entertain us on our terms. We've grown so accustomed to fast dopamine, The instant rush of novelty, the constant scroll of stimulation, that real conversations can feel unbearably slow. We expect others to keep up with the speed of our screens, not the pace of our hearts. But human connection doesn't move at the speed of social media. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, through patience and presence. That's why boring conversations often exist. Not because one person lacks substance, but because both people stay on the surface. We ask what they do, not what they think. We ask where they're from, but not what they long for. We talk about jobs and weather and headlines, but rarely about fears, regrets, or hopes. The problem isn't that some people are boring. It's that we rarely give them space to stop being defensive and start being real. When we ask deeper questions, we discover depth in almost everyone. A person who seems dull at first might be carrying a universe of quiet thought inside them. But to see it, we have to slow down. We have to stop searching for excitement and start looking for meaning. That requires patience, a quality we've forgotten how to practice. We live in a culture that glorifies speed. Fast talkers are persuasive. Fast workers are praised. Fast lifestyles are envied. But fast rarely means fulfilled. Fast strips life of reflection. Appreciating slowness isn't natural in a fast world. It's learned. It means sitting with silence without panic, letting pauses breathe in conversations instead of rushing to fill them. It means walking instead of running, listening instead of reacting, observing instead of posting. It means allowing depth to take time. And that's where growth happens, in the stillness we try to avoid. When we learn to sit quietly, without stimulation, our mind begins to reveal what's really going on inside. Stillness brings awareness, but awareness often brings discomfort. That's why many people fear silence. It forces us to meet ourselves. But boring people? They live there comfortably. They don't chase distraction. They've built their lives on a steady rhythm that allows room for thought, reflection, and peace. There's a concept in psychology called attention bias. It refers to the way we selectively focus on things that match our internal state. If we're used to high-speed stimulation, calmness feels like emptiness. If our minds are restless, someone else's stillness can feel unbearable. That's not a flaw in them. It's a mirror of our own addiction to intensity. We're so overstimulated that peace feels unnatural. But the truth is, discomfort in stillness is the first sign that your nervous system is remembering what calm feels like. Silence, too, deserves to be revalued. In our world, silence is often mistaken for absence. But silence isn't emptiness, it's a canvas. It's the space where real thought happens, where insights emerge, where meaning grows. Great art, great ideas, great love, they all come from silence first. The world's noise might keep us moving, but silence keeps us sane. And boring people, in their quietness, often embody that sanity. They remind us that peace doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. So maybe it's time we stop measuring people by how much they entertain us. Maybe it's time we look beyond charisma and energy and see the value in subtlety, the beauty in being consistent, grounded, and calm. Because in a world obsessed with being interesting, boring people offer balance. They remind us that a quiet life can still be meaningful, that still waters can run deep, and that depth doesn't need decoration to matter. Next time you meet someone who seems dull, pause for a moment before dismissing them. Ask yourself, is this person truly uninteresting, or am I simply impatient? Maybe the reason you can't see their light is because you're looking for fireworks instead of a candle flame. The truth is, maybe they're not boring. Maybe they're just being real in a world full of performance. They're not trying to prove, impress, or compete. They're living gently, and that gentleness doesn't register in a world tuned to extremes. They might not stand out in a crowd, but they stand within themselves. They've chosen peace over pressure, substance over spectacle, and self-awareness over approval. And if that's what being boring means, then maybe it's something worth aspiring to. Because the longer we chase excitement, the more we lose the ability to rest. But the moment we learn to appreciate what's still, what's subtle, what's quiet, we rediscover a deeper kind of interest. One that doesn't fade when the lights go out. So no, boring people aren't empty. They're just not performing for a world that can't sit still. They're living at the right volume in a world that's too loud. And perhaps the rest of us, in all our noise and haste, are the ones who've truly forgotten how to be alive. Ironically, the pursuit of being interesting often makes people less interesting. When we try too hard to impress, we become predictable. The constant entertainer, the oversharer, the person always chasing validation. True interestingness comes from authenticity, not performance. Think about it. The people who fascinate you most aren't necessarily loud. They're mysterious. They speak when they have something worth saying. They make you lean in, not back away. Meanwhile, boring people, who stay true to their nature, often build lives that are quietly fulfilling. Stable relationships, solid values, steady peace. They may not grab attention in a room, but they often hold it once you actually see them. In the long run, the loud burn bright and fast, but the dull glow steady and warm. So what is the psychology of people who are boring and dull? It's not that they lack depth, it's that they hide it differently. They find meaning in simplicity. They feel alive in quiet moments. And they offer a mirror to a restless world that's forgotten how to slow down. Maybe boring people aren't missing life's spark. Maybe they've simply stopped needing to prove that they have it. So the next time you meet someone who doesn't excite you, ask yourself, is it them, or is it your own craving for constant stimulation? Because sometimes the most dull people hold the deepest peace. And in a world addicted to noise, peace might just be the most interesting thing of all.